So I wanted to ask you, Nick, about the discovery of additional music by Mendelssohn that we don't know about.
Well,
you can tell us about.
you know, of course, the Mendelssohn octet is one of those pieces that one never tires of rediscovering. But I did find that when I had been was given a few of the manuscript files, PDF files from the Library of Congress, one of them was a Mendelssohn octet. And I thought, well, it'd be very nice to play off of that, you know, because there's often many stimulating things about that. And so I was sitting on the bed and kind of getting ready, and I thought, oh, I'll just go through it. And as I'm reading and going through the pages, it's, you know, little things that are surprised one way or another. And all of a sudden, I'm flipping the pages, and I'm seeing music that is completely unfamiliar. It just has nothing to do with the piece that I know as the Mendelssohn octet. And all of a sudden, I realized I wouldn't be playing from that score in the next performance. But it also immediately stimulated the idea that we should do a project where 8 people play off the manuscript, because there's no parts for that version. And 8 people play off the manuscript using computers, and that's exactly what we did, actually, with the Ariel Quartet, who was here at the New England Conservatory. And we created a project of it, and we showed the audience the manuscript. And we then sort of made a recording and an explanation that went on to iTunes U and this kind of thing. But just to summarize what it is, in the piece, I would say there's at least 150 bars. No, well, I'd say 100. I can't quite remember the count. But anyway, there's a very large amount of music in the first, second, and last movement that is totally different music than what you know. The third movement, by the way, tellingly, is absolutely identical to what the piece that we're familiar with. And of course, what's fascinating about this is, especially when we're in an environment working together on a piece that you've created, is, you know, maybe at this moment, Mendelssohn becomes a little less distant. And we enter this period of time when he really wasn't quite sure what was the best way for the piece to unfold. And in fact, that manuscript version was the version that first became famous. He only went back to it 7 years later and made the version that we know.
Could you speak to your experience now from the angle of working on Menachem's piece?
Yeah.
How did it feel to see the Mendelssohn through the prism of this, you know, a different creative artist?
Well, you know what? One of the things which is so interesting is that, you know, we're, of course, as we're all involved in different ways. Our quartet is a faculty quartet in residence at the New England Conservatory of Music. And we do find so often we're reminding students, they get very worried about intonation and working, and I don't mean to detract from that. But a lot of times it's actually the rhythmic framework which decides how something is communicated. And I just found it so fascinating that the very first thing that Menachem worked with in that was the signature of the rhythm, not really even the pitch. And then eventually the pitches came to the theme of the Mendelssohn. And I mean, I think it's just a wonderful movement. And I mean, for us, you know, if I can just say, it was just such a great pleasure to get involved in the music that you've created, and thank you. So.
I want to ask you, David, when you had a reception at Berkeley, which Professor Friedman organized, I remember Larry Bell and you yourself, you mentioned a tactile experience that you felt. Could you talk a little bit about this?
Sure. I think one of the things about Menachem's music is it's quite evident that he is, you know, not just a great composer, but also a very experienced performer, because the music he is writing feels like it's written for the instrument. Like Larry was talking about how the chords just fit the hands and it feels good, and while there might be something difficult, it's idiomatic, it's not awkward, and even just the pacing of things, just a sense that the composer had a sense of what it's like to be on stage and how the experience flows in time and how that means there should be certain proportions or certain development of tempo. And so it was really gratifying to play music that was written for the performers in mind and with the psychology and perspective of the performer.
Thank you. Now I want to ask Miimi a question. Miimi is an established, wonderful choreographer on her own right, and there obviously is a great deal of cross-pollination in the work of Menachem and Miimi, and as a matter of fact, I think the Metamorphosis, the piece that Tal Zilber delivered so wonderfully, I think was inspired partially by the music to Rehov Sum Sum, which is a very familiar, Sesame Street, very familiar to Israeli audience that Menachem wrote, and partially by music to your choreography. So could you speak just a little bit about what it means to, this fascinating cross-pollination that you do have? Just a little bit about this and how your work finds its way to Menachem's work.
Okay, I'll try. I'm excited, and Matti didn't tell me that I'm supposed to go on stage, and English is not my native language, so I'll try to find my words through that excitement. We know each other how many years? 43. And beside having 2 children, and also a granddaughter now. Each one of us created in his own field. Menachem wrote his music for several years by himself. I choreographed dance by myself, and only later on, when we felt mature enough to be able to work together, we started to create pieces together, to collaborate. Sometimes the dance was almost finished, and then Menachem composed music to that specific dance. Sometimes the music was already established, and I choreographed a piece to the music. And then later on, we choreographed and we composed a piece that we really worked together at the same time, which was a very unique experience.
I think this is wonderful. Now, Menachem, I want to ask you something. I know that you had established yourself as a pianist, as a classical and jazz pianist, long before you actually started to compose, because I believe you started composing very late, at the age of 37, right?
Yeah, true.
Now,
yeah.
Could you tell us what was the moment? What was the moment that you finally decided that you're ready? Was it a feeling?
No. There was there was something very specific, I think, at the time. At that time, I was performing as a pianist, chamber music pianist, but at the same time, I had a piano trio in Israel for several years. And it was just going along at the same time. And I felt that my jazz playing, in a way, got stuck, because I felt that I'm not playing really something which is fully original of mine. I was playing in the style of Bill Evans, which of course I still love and share it all my life, but it was Bill Evans. And I felt that I have to find my own way as a jazz player. And I was thinking a lot, what will be my next step? So either I'll start writing original pieces and look for my own style in jazz, or maybe I just leave it all together and maybe I'll find my own voice as a classical or concert music composer and so on. I mean, I always thought about myself as a composer. It doesn't mean, even when I wrote arrangements for Israel's best-known singer Chava Alberstein and other singers, my way of looking at arrangement is really as composing, but in a certain different style, okay? So I knew that I have this something in me, but for many years I felt that it's complicated. I wouldn't go into it, but for many years I felt that I have to find really my voice, and I didn't want to be like other composers, like many composers, even young composers who write just because there is certain atmosphere or esprit or something that's, because of this, they write in a certain way that they really don't feel it very much inside them. They just do it because of many, many reasons. I felt that I must write my own composition and in a very authentic way without thinking about what people would say about my music, that it's this or that. I didn't mind. You know, I was mature enough to decide this is my music and that's what I want. And even if it's not like in the style of my colleagues or in Israel or in the world, I don't care. So that's why it took me a long time. So this moment was when I had to decide which way should I go. Should I write jazz pieces or should I leave it all together and find my own way? This was the moment. So it's a very definite moment. I remember it very clearly how it happened.
Thank you. And now I think it's a good time to open it to the audience. But before we open it up to the audience, since we have so many distinguished guests here, I want to ask somebody in the audience a question. I know Professor Joshua Jacobson is here from the Zamir Chorale. So I want to ask Josh, since you performed many of Menachem's arrangements, we heard such an eclectic picture of Menachem's oeuvre tonight. What is your take on it? What can you tell us about your work on Menachem's arrangements? We might need the microphone for somebody. Okay, thanks.
Al regel achat, right? So what I love most about Menachem's music is, as I think you said earlier, he knows the instrument that he's writing for, in this case, the voice. We heard a little bit of that in the beautiful songs that we heard performed, and he's able to write an accompaniment that is, first of all, a partnership with the voice. It's not there's a voice and then there's something supporting the voice. It's a duet for piano and voice, and it feels just right. And it's the same thing with his choral pieces. They are not the harmonies that you expect to hear with that piece, and yet they feel, what else could it have been? And each singer in the chorus, especially the altos normally get just to sing D over and over and over again. But Menachem manages to write for each of the voice parts a wonderful line, and then the whole, of course, comes together in a beautiful way. And I think in some way, you may not like what I'm saying, but I think you're carrying on the idea of the Eastern Mediterranean music, but in a very unique way, blending East and West in this wonderful style, for which we thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Josh.
Thank you.
And now it's a good opportunity to open into your... Somebody has a percussion question, apparently. to open into your questions. So any questions in the audience before we proceed to the desserts? David, yes. Please wait for your microphone. We need somebody to give it. Yes? Thank you.
Hello? Okay. In your notes, you talk about a certain piece having a tonal center. Could you tell us a little bit about your compositional technique and how you approach composing pieces?
Yeah, okay, this is a lecture for many hours, maybe too. So yeah, I would say that I don't have a specific technique. Okay, let's start from this. So, I mean, each piece somehow creates itself in a way. I can say that it's very important for me to have really tonal centers. That's something that I would say that I have in all my pieces. Even if it sounds sometimes 8-tonal or 12-tonal or whatever, which I don't write in rows or something, anything like this. But most of my music, I would call it, like Bartok said about his music, it's a 12-tone chromatic music. That's what I write. But of course, I think that the tonal feeling is something rooted very deep in us. And so in every piece of mine, I will emphasize in certain sections a tone, something that will be more important than the other. So there will be a kind of hierarchy. There's always a hierarchy somewhere along my pieces. And in each piece, it's a little bit different. I found out, by the way, that most of my pieces are on D. D is a Jewish, right? It's something that you find a lot. Also klezmer music, many times it's in D.
Just not the alto parts. And...
Tonight, for example, all of a sudden I found out that some of the pieces are on D, some of them are on C, for example. Yeah, I didn't plan it in advance. Somehow that's how my ear just hear. Maybe because when I write for strings and the low C of the cello or the viola, so that's why they're on C. But I didn't plan it in advance. It's just something that comes out of my writing. Other than that, I can say one thing, that I improvise a lot. So, I mean, usually my starting point will be a rhythmic, melodic, or harmonic idea that comes usually, not always, usually out of improvising. So, and then I try to understand what was created by my improvisation, and then I set it up on paper and I try to analyze my instincts. So that's the way I usually create.
Thank you. More questions? Osnat had a face that she wanted to say something. Any other questions before we proceed to the chocolate cake? Okay, thank you so much, Nikolas Kitchen, Miimi Wisenberg, Menachem Wiesenberg, David Wallace. Thank you to the amazing Borromeo String Quartet, Tal Zilber, and all the amazing musicians. Thank you all for coming, and to Berkeley Northeastern Organizing. Thank you very much.